This year, we are planning to grow enough food to feed our family of 4 for the entire year. And how exactly we're planning to do that is exactly that, with precise planning. And I'm going to explain in this video how we're planning to do exactly that. So stick around. So our entire property is approximately half of an acre. I am very specifically setting out rows for specific crops that we eat throughout the year. Things that we tend to spend a lot of money on at the grocery store. Sorry about the chickens. And we want to replace that bill by just planting the seeds ourselves, and we'll save a lot of money and eat a lot healthier in the process. And that's the first step, is to look at what are the biggest items, staple items that you typically buy at the grocery store. For us, a big one is potatoes. And potatoes are a very easy one to grow. You just need some space to do it. So I'll just show you this. This is my rough draft plan. That I make something like this every year, and it's a rough draft because it changes very oftenly, sometimes on the fly, but I like to start with a solid plan to have an idea where I want things to go and where they need to be and when they need to get out of the ground and when the next thing needs to go in the ground. So we always have something in the ground growing. Potatoes, like I mentioned, there's a far area on the far edge of our property that I've had issues using. I couldn't figure out a good way to use it. And last year I tried to grow a big chicken garden for my chickens. I grew a big plot of corn, beans, and squash, or at least I tried to, but the deer decimated that plot. And I don't want to grow corn there again. So I'm gonna move my corn plot to in front of our house so I can keep a better eye on the crop. But I'm still gonna utilize that area, and I'm gonna grow our potatoes on the far edge there, right where the deer like to be, but I'm going to be more protective of those crops because now I have some low tunnel hoops that I'm going to use those to protect those crops, so it won't be so easy for the deer to come in. And I'm not even sure if they would eat the greens of the potatoes. They might, because I know that they've decapitated some of my tomato plants that are, and tomato, if you look at the leaves of a tomato plant compared to a potato, they're very similar. I think they're related, actually. So I'm going to try to keep those covered as best I can. But for potatoes, for the entire year, I was doing some research on Google, and Google says that if for every 1 pound of potato planted, you can expect to harvest between 5 and 10 pounds of a harvest from that 1 pound. So 5 on the lower end to 10 on the high end, depending on the growing conditions. So for our family, we're aiming for a minimum. We want to get at least 500 pounds, 500 to 600 pounds of potatoes. So in order to do that, we're going to try to plant between 50 and 60 pounds of potatoes, of seed potatoes, in hopes of getting that high end of the yield to enable us to have enough potatoes for our family for an entire year. I never tried to grow that much before, but I'm excited to do that and just dedicate a space to potatoes because it's a really simple process. Just plant in the ground, hill them up as they grow. Something with potatoes that I've learned is they need a lot of fertilizer. You might know that already. You might not know that already. Last year, I actually accidentally put some hot chicken manure compost right on top of some of my potatoes, and they ended up being some of my best yielded potatoes where I had done that. So potatoes like a high nitrogen source there, so that's something I'm probably going to try to do again to grow the most potatoes that I can using our chicken manure. Now, besides the potatoes, we're going to be growing some other staple crops that we eat all the time, and those are onions. And I've grown onions in the past, but I've never seemed to grow enough onions to feed us for the whole year. So this year we're changing that, and in fact, I've already seeded my onions. They have not sprouted yet, but I have some in trays behind me, and hopefully they'll be sprouting very soon. We've still got some cold temperatures, and they're just in here in an unheated greenhouse. But I'm hoping in the next few weeks we'll start to see some growth on those onions. But I grew enough onions to feed us, to have at least 1 onion for each day of the year. So I think it's around 400 some onions that I've planted. So we could at least have 1 onion per day for the entire year. So we'll see how that works out. Broccoli, another big crop we tend to buy a lot of at the store. And broccoli is something that I've struggled with to grow. I've had issues with pests trying to decimate it. But now that I have low tunnels and I can protect those crops with an insect netting, I'm going to be growing a lot more broccoli in hopes of putting it in our freezer and having a healthy vegetables that we could just pull out of the freezer for meals whenever we want them. Another crop is sweet potatoes. We eat a lot of sweet potatoes, not as much as regular potatoes, but sweet potatoes are such an easy crop to grow. They store really well. That's one of the best things. I think they store better than potatoes, regular potatoes. To grow slips from them in order to grow more sweet potatoes, I've done videos on that in the past. It's a really simple thing. You could just take an old sweet potato, put it in either a jar of water or plant it in a pot of soil, and it'll start to grow green slips. And when they get to about 5 or 6 inches tall, you snip those slips off, and then you can put those slips in a cup of water and let some roots start to grow in the bottom. And then once those slips have rooted, you can plant them, and that plant will produce so many pounds of sweet potatoes just from one little sweet potato slip. That's what I like about sweet potatoes. So I have plans for a few rows of sweet potatoes on that far plot as well. And my plan also, after those potatoes are harvested, we're going to plant them in the beginning of April. And so that means July, late June, early July, the potatoes will be harvested. And we're going to want to put something else in the ground immediately after those potatoes are harvested, so we can keep using the space that we have, the limited space that we have. And what I'm going to do is plant tomatoes in those rows of potatoes as soon as they're harvested. And that's something I'm going to have to definitely re-amend the soil, because the potatoes take up a lot of nutrition, and so do tomatoes, so we'll have to re-amend the soil. But I'm going to grow determinate style tomatoes in that bed, and we're going to have them started about a month before those potatoes are ready. So those tomatoes will be started around June 1st, and then they'll be in this greenhouse just growing and ready to be transplanted when all those potatoes come out. So the tomatoes will go in, and because they're a determinate variety, determinate style tomatoes will do better in an open field setting like that compared to an indeterminate tomato, which I find takes a bit longer and it's a lot harder to manage. But a determinate style tomato will just grow to a determined size and set all of its fruit, and it'll just be easier for that kind of setting. So now, right in front of our house, we have our front plot that I call, where I have 14 rows that are about 2.5 feet wide and 20 feet long. And this is going to be my planned chicken garden, where I'm planning to grow as much food as I possibly can to feed my chickens and offset that feed bill, which a lot of you who have chickens understand can be quite costly. So I'm trying to figure out ways to lower that monthly burden of cost. And the way that I'm going to do that is by growing 10 rows of Three Sisters garden. So I'm going to have corn, I'm going to have beans, a climbing pole bean, and squash in those 10 rows, with all of that intended to feed the chickens. However, the amount of chickens I have, I only need to really feed them 1 cob of corn a day, maybe 2. And in order to do that, I'm only going to need, I believe it's 4 of those rows to feed them, to have enough corn to feed them for a year. So the rest of the corn is going to be for our family. So we'll have some corn for the chickens, we'll let to dry. The other corn we'll save for us for fresh eating, that we will also store either in our freezer or canning. I'm not sure, because we haven't had to do that before, but I'm excited to save a whole bunch of corn so we don't have to buy that at the store, because that's something that we would buy a lot of. And corn, we want to buy organic corn. We want to buy, obviously, non-GMO corn. Most corn that you get in the supermarket now is non-GMO. But sometimes you just don't know if the package isn't labeled and you want to eat good corn. Best way to do it is to grow it yourself and grow it organically. So that's what we're going to do. See how much we could grow for us to hopefully feed us for most of the year. So there's going to be 10 rows for our chicken garden for of the Three Sisters garden, and I have 4 remaining rows. And what I'm planning to do in the chicken garden for the spring is to plant cabbage. So there's a variety of cabbage called Golden Acre. That's a more compact head of cabbage. So I'll be able to actually plant more of them in a row compared to a larger size cabbage. So they won't be as large, but I'll be able to grow more heads of cabbage. The cabbage is something that I could feed to the chickens each day along with the rest of their food. And they go crazy for cabbage. So we'll be able to grow 60 heads of cabbage in each row. So 60 times 4 is 240 heads of cabbage. That's a lot of cabbage. That's about 2/3 of the year. We can give them a cabbage a day to our chickens. That's really, really helpful. And then after the cabbage is harvested and done by August, we're gonna plant sunflowers. So we'll do 4 rows of sunflowers in those same beds. And the sunflowers will help rebuild the soil after the cabbage is done, and also give us all those heads of black oil sunflower seeds to harvest for more food sources over the winter months where it's really important and they need more of those high protein sources, which the sunflower seeds definitely have. So that'll be really fun thing to have for the chickens. There are some other things that I want to grow that we seem to always run out of and have to buy at the store, that I hate buying at the store, and those are things like peppers. I love having peppers and adding them to my omelets and my eggs in the morning, and peppers are something that I'm planning to grow a lot more of, but the way that I'm going to grow those peppers is in our original green stalk, because I experimented with one green stalk with just peppers last year and they did fantastic. However, it did better for the more lunchbox sized peppers or like Italian style peppers than the bigger blocky like California Wonder bell peppers didn't do as well. They still performed okay, but in the green stalk they did a lot better with the longer smaller kind of peppers. So that's what I'm going to do in my 2 original green stalks that I have. I'm going to grow a ton of snack peppers that I can store in the freezer and have throughout the entire year, and they produced a ton of peppers. So I'm going to do even more of that this year. And the best part about the green stalk is they don't take up much space. They're just like 12 square feet or something like that, and they're really pretty to look at too. So that'll be really fun to have more peppers. It'll be really fun to have more peppers and not have to buy them all the time at the store. Another thing I grew in our leaf green stalk, which is a little bit different, it's not as deep of a pocket in the green stalk. I grew one of my leaf green stalks with strawberries, and that was amazing. Definitely going to do that again and keep all those strawberries in that leaf green stalk. But I have another leaf green stalk, and in that green stalk, I'm going to do an herb garden, and that's something that we've desperately been missing. And I have plans for my leaf green stalk herb garden to grow 1 layer with cilantro, 1 layer of dill, parsley, chives, mint, oregano, and rosemary. Things we always tend to want, but we never seem to have. So now I'll have a dedicated space for our herb garden for some things that we always want, but don't really know where to put. They're gonna look really nice and grow really well in the leaf green stalk. I'll quickly share with you some of the seeds that I'm planning to plant. I'm very excited to plant. This is the Anasazi corn. I've never grown this before, but I don't know if you can see on the back, it says it's one of the oldest corn in existence. It was supposedly found in a cave in New Mexico where the Anasazi tribe lived, and that's just really cool and excited to see these. It's supposed to be drought tolerant and really prolific and lots of pretty colors in the corn. And a corn like this typically is a dent corn, but this is actually known as a sweet corn. So really excited to try this, see how it does. This is another, this is a squash that I'm planning to grow. Never grew this before, but this is another kind from the Native American tribes. It says it's grown by the people of the Miami Nation. Sweet flesh squash, extra large, thin skinned. So this looks kind of unique. Excited to try this. Gete okosomen. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. Pinto shell beans. This is for our chicken garden. Grow. See how many pinto beans we can grow, because this is what I feed to my chickens every day. Feed them rice and beans. Not growing the rice, but see how much of the beans I can grow. This is the golden acre cabbage that I'm planning to grow. I grew this once or twice. It's a nice compact head of cabbage, and I think the chickens will like this. So there you go. That's my rough draft of a garden plan for our self-sufficient garden this year. What are you planning for your garden this year? Do you have plans, or do you just throw a bunch of seeds in the ground and hope for the best? Because I do that too. I still do that too. So let me know down in the comments if that's you or you're more of a planner. But anyway, that's all I wanted to share in this video. Thanks for watching. Subscribe if you're new here. I'd really appreciate you if you subscribed and help us get closer to that 10,000 subscriber mark. We're inching ever so closely. We're getting there. Eventually we'll get there. But thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.